I have 5:45, so I will call to order the February 8th, 2023 regular meeting of the Hendersonville City Council. We begin our meetings with a silent invocation for people to pray or meditate as they choose, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will rise, please. If you'll join me in the pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone signed in on our public comment sheet? Okay, we have 5 people here. Is there anyone seeking recognition online to speak during public comment?
Madam Mayor, 3 hands are raised.
I couldn't hear. 3? Okay, so that's 8 people. Going to have to make it 2 minutes apiece. I know that's not a lot, but you can fit a lot into 2 minutes. So when I call your name, if you'll come to the microphone and give your name and address for the clerk's record. Thank you. Vince Costello is number 1, sir. And they will have a timer up on the screen for you. Yeah, 2 minutes. There we go.
Thank you. I was wondering why it was red. Express my interest in supporting the lighting ordinance. I've looked over your documents and what you've done to date, and also did some research on what exists out there today in terms of different counties, different cities throughout the United States, and think it's a good, responsible idea. I look at it from a taxpayer standpoint, and I'm a Henderson County taxpayer. And it makes sense, a whole lot of sense, for me to make changes in the way we do business in terms of energy usage. Energy usage clearly is going to go up over the next several years. I've already seen Duke's 18% increase requests that they made just recently, and I expect it'll go up even more based on demand going on in the world right now. So I'd like to see the county make an effort to do a responsible thing in terms of improving lighting from, if nothing else, purely from the standpoint of cost-benefit basis. When some of my research, I looked up various studies done by communities across the United States. One I thought was particularly interesting, done by a city in Minnesota. It was done by their energy division, and they did a detailed analysis of replacing all of their street lights within the entire city, which was a fairly expensive operation, over $2 million. And they determined that within an 8-year period, it will have paid for itself alone. Maintenance would go down from something like $200,000 a month to $33,000 a month because of the efficiencies of LED lighting. So again, I want to express my interest in supporting it, if nothing else, from a taxpayer standpoint of saving money in the long run. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. James Gorsuch.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is James Gorsuch. Address is 1732 Haywood Road, Hendersonville. I am a Henderson County native, a Hendersonville resident, and I'm here today as Pisgah Legal Services Managing Attorney for Legal Intake Systems and Client Access. Wanted to thank the City of Hendersonville for all its support over the years and encourage this council to support the request that we have currently made for funding to support our work with the Hendersonville Connection Center. Our proposal constitutes both a component of the Connection Center project that will be a transformational aspect for clients and the community, and an excellent investment for the City of Hendersonville. Our proposal is to staff a full-time attorney and social worker at the Hendersonville Connection Center once it opens, and to provide access to fiscal legal services for vulnerable members of our community who might otherwise have difficulty reaching us. Those clients at the Connection Center would have access to the full range of our services, including housing resources, domestic violence prevention, public benefits access, including Social Security, disability, food stamps, and others, access to health care, whether through the Affordable Care Act or Medicaid, assistance with tax filings, including expanded tax credits that could yield significant life-changing amounts of money, and social work support. Essentially, we are proposing to be a one-stop shop within a one-stop shop for our services. It's also an excellent investment. Pisco Legal has 40-plus years of involvement and investment in the Hendersonville community. We've been here since 1980. Our second largest, our second oldest office is here. We do have 2 existing locations in the city, and a lot of our management structure has been moved into the city of Hendersonville to show our commitment. And we hold a 4-star rating, the highest available, from Charity Navigator, indicating the quality of an investment in our services. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Brown.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Neil Brown, 849 Sandburg Terrace in Hendersonville. No doubt you all received my 4-page summary over the weekend. Hopefully some of you have read it. I want to spend a minute and a half going over the lighting ordinance that you'll be considering later on tonight. And I'm here mainly because my big concern is sustainability of the city. That's why many of us love this city, why some of us moved here. And hope to plan to stay here. The ordinance is really, it's not a great ordinance, it's a good one. It's a good step, a good starting point. Just want to reiterate the benefits. We all know, established scientific research, that excess artificial lighting will disrupt circadian rhythms in aquatic species. It disrupts the insect life cycle. It disrupts amphibian life cycles. We're now finding out, well, with bats also, so there we go, the insects like it when bats are disrupted. But more and more research is coming out of the disruption on humans. And part of it is a quote from the AMA, American Medical Association. LED lighting should be properly shielded to minimize glare and detrimental human health and environmental effects. And it goes on from there. I would home in on 2 things with the ordinance you're considering tonight. One, I'd encourage you to drop the exemptions for government buildings and for churches. I can't think of a reason to have churches exempt, and government should be setting the example in something like this, so I'd encourage that exemption to be dropped. Also, I know there's a big dispute over amortization. I'd like to point out that in December, the Business Advisory Council came out in favor of a 15-year amortization, both in their meeting with the city planners and at the planning board meeting. 15 years should be a good amortization, I would think. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Sharon Terrell.
Good evening. I'm here representing IAM as their new board president. And my purpose in being here tonight is to bring you up to date on some information about our proposal. I know you're going to be discussing ARPA funds later. Very briefly, I want to talk about the huge increase in services that we've provided. And by the way, I've given a copy of each of my remarks to each of you, so hopefully you all got one, so that you don't have to worry about all the details. But we have seen an enormous increase in people that we've served this past year. We served 19,116 families, a 59% increase over last year. Total individuals, we served 47,736, a 96% increase over last year. We provided food, rent and mortgage assistance, clothing and household goods, bus passes, gasoline, and utility assistance. More than 40% of the families that we serve are Hispanic. More than 50% of the families we serve live within the city of Hendersonville. 581 contacts with us were reported as homeless. We've become a big supplier of services to homeless people. We have tents and all kinds of necessities. We have 250 volunteers who have come back to us after the pandemic. And this means that we are providing a huge amount of services with a very small amount of staff, a very cost-effective way of presenting services. I want to quickly tell you about some new information. Our proposal included a request for a new space to add on to our pantry. Well, we've just learned from Manna Food Bank that we're going to be required to have a clean room. And that is going to mean that the money that we need to raise for an extension of our pantry to meet the increase ongoing of people in our community is going to increase about 40% more because we're going to have to increase that space. And finally, I just want to say in terms of priorities, we know that municipalities have a wide range of options for using ARPA funds, from healthcare repayment to water and sewer infrastructure and to help households. We know that small businesses as well as nonprofits have struggled to recover from the pandemic. In terms of community values, we hope that you believe, as we do, that poor and working poor citizens deserve to receive some direct help from the recovery funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Ingram.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Ingram. I'm the Executive Director of the Hendersonville Connection Center, and I reside at 10 Tarragon Place in East Flat Rock. Mr. Gorsuch summed it up so succinctly, so thank you for that, Mr. Gorsuch. But I mostly just wanted to stand up here and acknowledge and recognize how intentional and thoughtful you've been in this process of designating these ARPA funds and how much that is appreciated by the community as a whole. I have nothing but respect and admiration for the way that you've gone about these conversations, the thought and intentionality you've put into it. And I know that you've already seen our proposal. I look forward to a very successful partnership with the City of Hendersonville. We're grateful for all the support that we've had so far, and we look forward to strengthening that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If you could call the people online, please.
Lynn, you are unmuted.
Okay, is someone online?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Lynn, you are unmuted.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, go ahead, please. You have your two minutes, Lynn.
Can you hear me? Lynn Williams.
Yes.
309 Chadwick Avenue. Thank you. I am commenting today specifically with urgent concern around historic Boyd Park, specifically around the historic artifacts that are embedded in the landscape design of the historic mini golf course that qualify for the historic landmark designation itself. Please complete the site inventory with detailed documentation, preservation plan, and memorial or reflection space. This course of action for documentation was suggested by the State Office of Preservation and also requested by the HPC. I am very concerned because this might be the very last meeting possible. My understanding is, the fire department is pretty much getting everything they've requested. At this point, the request would be maybe like a parking spot size space for, some kind of memorial, some kind of planter gardens, a bench, but specifically my concern is about the plaster paintings, the actual historic course itself. And in this process of demolition, which seems imminent, if there's some way that we could work together with the HPC, with the Friends of Boyd Park and Laura E. Cord Mini Golf to try to salvage and preserve any part of the actual historic course while documenting it, and then potentially integrating that into the design of where the bench might be or something like that, but there's no way to be able to integrate it if it's decimated in demolition. So I ask, please, all it will take is one council person or a staff member, the planning director, Mr. Holloway, to step up and be creative about a design that incorporates this. I don't think the design has changed since the entire process, and we're just asking for this small section where the historic course was. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next person?
Ralph Hammond Green, you are unmuted.
Good evening. My name is Ralph R. Hammond Green. I live at 1232 Hyman Avenue, Hendersonville. I wish to strongly urge City Council to pass the text amendment lighting ordinance. While it is not as complete or as strong as many of us would like, it is a good beginning. I feel strongly the amortization or grandfathering provisions must remain in the ordinance. Contrary to expressions of some, including some on council, this issue was brought to the city more than 4 years ago, not with the intent of diminishing the ambience of downtown Hendersonville, but rather to restore the ambience and diminish the wasteful light pollution emanating not only from Main Street, but from all the surrounding areas of Hendersonville, and to assure that new development was undertaken to the best and most efficient standards. There is nothing in the proposed ordinance which decreases useful and needed light, as for pedestrian safety. Some seem to believe it will require a reduction in light at convenience stores and fueling stations. This could not be further from the truth. It does require the elimination of wasted upward light and wasteful intrusion of light pollution upon adjacent non-commercial areas. Members of council mentioned dark or underlighted parking lots. In fact, it does not require minimum lighting levels for parking lots or areas adjacent to public or private buildings. With concerns expressed by members of council about this, maybe minimum lighting standards for such areas should be added to the ordinance. In conclusion, I strongly urge council to pass the text amendment lighting ordinance and that it include the amortization provisions.
Thank you. And the last person?
Ken Fitch, you are unmuted.
Ken Fitch, 1046 Patton Street. Regarding Edwards Park, a few suggestions for minor additions easily accomplished. The design for the Laura Korn mini golf has received much praise. At this location, it is also important to recognize the history of this site. According to local historians, Edwards Park was named for former Mayor Edwards and included the scout cabins and at one time even the VFW. It would seem appropriate to add a plaque, perhaps honoring Mayor Edwards, and or signage recognizing the history of the site, easily added to the site plan we've seen. And then add out documentations to the planned display recognizing Laura Korn and Boyd Park. These suggested additions would also serve to avoid any after-the-fact issues such as occurred regarding Boyd Park. Now, one recognizes that there has been some uneasiness about the proposed art installations and its journey from concept to actual realization. But I would suggest that perhaps it would be wise as an alternative to provide an open space area at that location so that there would be no obstruction to the sight lines at the intersection of North Main and Locust Street that may experience future increase in traffic. On the agenda tonight, there is the amendments to city code, and one can see many issues because we're looking at the code again, and one would hope that there would be a review of some of the existing code, and one does look forward to the presentation by the eminent attorney Daniel Hyman. Thank you.
Thank you. You were all great about staying within your time limit or very close to it, and I do appreciate that.
Minutes.
Okay?
Which means like right there. Great.
All right, council, the agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to have added to the agenda this evening or removed from? Or if not, a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I move that the city council approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. We have the agenda. Consent agenda, is there anything on the consent agenda that you would like to have moved to the regular agenda so it can be discussed? If not, a motion to approve those items?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Very good. All right, we have a variety of presentations this evening. First one, Chief Miller.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, thank you very much for allowing us an opportunity for a few minutes of your time this evening. I wanted to make a formal introduction of our new Deputy Chief of Operations, Daniel Chavis. Chief Chavis comes to us from Charleston, where he was a battalion chief. He's got many, many years of experience, wealth of education, and so we're excited to have him on board our organization. His wife and 3 children are still currently residing in Charleston, but they'll be making the move back up here in just a few months. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce you to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I just want to say,
Yes.
Mayor, council members, Mr. Connor, Mr. Prawley, thank you for the opportunity to come join Chief Miller and Chief Ford to help lead the organization in the next several years. I'm 3 months here. I've already noticed the caliber of the employees we have in the fire department. They're second to none, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, MVP recipients.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor Bolt, I will start with let's start with the police department since both of our recipients are here. So if Chief Duncan will come up, and also I'll ask Andrew Gunnan to come first. So as everybody's coming up, remind folks that, you know, we recognize our employees when they go above and beyond, and many of these nominations come from the public or internally from a staff, and this is a recognition for the great job that they do. Officer Gunnan responded to a citizen's call for help in reference to her cat being stuck behind a dryer vent. The cat's head was stuck and needed assistance. The caller was elderly and was incapable of helping the cat herself. Officer Gunnan went above and beyond by crawling into the tight space and moving an appliance to get to the cat and successfully rescued it. He demonstrated service excellence by putting a member of the public first and represented the city with professionalism. So we'd like to thank Andrew for a job well done and going above and beyond the call of duty. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And while the chief is here, I'll ask Officer Landon McCraw to come up, please. This was a letter that the mayor received. Dear Miss Mayor, I'm writing today to praise your beautiful city and incredible law enforcement and helpful citizens. I always try to visit Hendersonville in the fall for obvious reasons and just the relaxing atmosphere not found in the big city of Birmingham, Alabama. Due to a series of unfortunate events, flat tire, me and my traveling companion found ourselves stranded at the Ingalls parking lot at North Highland Lake Road. Long story short, we waited on AAA to come and tow the car for over 3.5 hours, only to find out around midnight they couldn't help us until the morning. With a freeze warning forecasted, we were starting to panic. The only place that we had left to turn was the police. We called the non-emergency number and explained our predicament to the dispatcher. She quickly assured us that she would send an officer to help us. Within 5 minutes, Officer Landon McCraw was there to help. You just cannot imagine the relief as we were two women traveling by ourselves. He was kind, courteous, and helped us to find the humor in what had just happened to us. He took us to our hotel at the Fairfield Inn and Suites on Upward Road, and even helped us with the names of the local tow truck companies we can get the next morning. They were there to tow us within 15 minutes of when we called. Unfortunately, the present climate of the world, being stranded away from home, can be a frightening experience when you're traveling alone. I thank you for keeping Hendersonville a beautiful place, and thank the police officer for making us feel safe and offering his help. We'd like to thank Landon for a job well done. We have one other nominee who I think is not here for our quarterly. I don't think Chris is here. Chris McClure. Okay. I'd like to recognize Chris McClure from Public Works. Also a citizen compliment. We had recently returned from an extended trip, and I had gotten out of the routine of putting my trash and recycling out first thing in the morning. When I heard the truck coming up the street, I was afraid that I would either miss the truck or at least delay the men picking up the trash. Although I apologized profusely, it quickly became apparent that an apology was not necessary, as the young man was not only very cheerful, but he greeted me by name. Mr. McClure must have noticed my bewilderment at not remembering him, but he quickly put me at ease and told me that he recalled my name from when he was our postman. I found it quite refreshing that on a hot summer morning, Chris went the extra distance to be not only helpful, but very friendly. We are lucky to have him as an employee of the city of Hendersonville. So we'd like to thank Chris for a job well done and going above. And then, so in addition to our quarterly MVPs, which we do, quarterly MVPs are put into a master pool, and we select an MVP of the year. So I'd like to ask Lee Smith to come up and ask Paul Williams to come up as we recognize Paul for being our MVP of the year. And Lee, there's a plaque right behind you that you will get to keep in your department. So, Paul Williams, and he was this is when he was recognized as a quarterly MVP. On May 9th, the Water and Sewer Operations Center received a call from Pardee Hospital that a contractor had hit the water main that supplied the day surgery portion of the hospital. The line that was impacted was on Pardee Hospital property and therefore not maintained by Hendersonville Water and Sewer. Paul Williams was brought into the conversation and without hesitation knew that the city needed to do everything possible to get help for the hospital. This particular line was not only critical to the operation of the hospital, but could directly affect the health and well-being of the patients. Therefore, Paul contacted all relevant internal personnel, collected all the necessary repair parts, and collaborated with one of our excavation crews to be on site within an hour to make the emergency repairs in order for the water service to be restored. This avoided shutting down Pardee's water supply. This is just one example of the compliments and the recognition that I receive on a yearly basis about Paul and the way he goes above and beyond. So it's an honor for us to recognize Paul as the 2022 MVP of the year. So congratulations, Paul. Job well done.
And thank you to all of our MVPs who were nominated throughout the year. And congratulations to Paul for being the one selected for special recognition for this year. All right. Understanding flood risk. And here he comes.
I'd like to recognize Brendan Shanahan with our engineering department. So welcome, Brendan.
Thank you. This is my first opportunity to be before you since this council was seated. And I'm happy to discuss with you flood risks in our community, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. This is a recent hurricane that spared our region from the greatest impacts. However, here are some other weather events that didn't spare us. I'll go backwards in time. This is October 2020. Ingalls-Spartanburg Highway. This is April 2019. May 2018. And here's July 2017. Anybody remember this one? July 1916. Our area has a long history of flooding, and knowing that this area has and always will flood, here are some of the questions we have to consider. Where do we build? How do we build? What do we build? When is it time for floods to reclaim land? Building too close to rivers not only endangers the safety and property of the owner, but can also obstruct movement of the water downstream, which impacts flood risk for others that live in the floodplain or do business in the floodplain. So therefore, it's important to identify areas where flood risk is highest. And for this, we rely on maps. The modeling of precipitation and hydraulics is a critical tool in assessing risk. Modeling is used to create flood insurance rate maps, also known as FIRMs, by FEMA for communities throughout the United States and its territories. These maps show regulatory areas that are inundated by the theoretical base flood, more commonly known as the 100-year storm or the 1% annual chance event. The map shows these areas in blue, and this is called the base floodplain. And federal, state, and local statutes are based on this information. And it's also the map that mortgage lenders reference for requiring flood insurance. The firm is imperfect for several reasons. It's become more outdated as methods of analysis have improved, and as precipitation data no longer is representative because the frequency of heavy precipitation is increasing as the warmer atmosphere can absorb more moisture. Maps are also imprecise, and they largely ignore flood-prone areas with smaller drainage basins. FEMA's process doesn't map flooding for drainage basins smaller than 1 square mile. And also the time period between map updates is many years. The most recent map in our area is from 2007, and before that, 1982. We expect new maps for our county probably sometime in the next 2 to 5 years. They haven't nailed down an exact time frame yet, but it's coming. Several counties in North Carolina have already received their new maps. They go east to west, so we're going to be on the tail end of that. So what is the true risk? That CNN interview in the previous slide referenced a study by First Street Foundation. And while I'm not aware that this study has been independently verified or widely accepted as authoritative to supersede the current regulatory data, the analysis is an indication that jurisdictions universally are undersupported by the available information to adequately plan for or respond to flood disasters. Consequently, the necessity for refining our tools of analysis is coming more into focus. That First Street plan in 2020 estimated that there are over 4 times as many properties in our county that are at risk of flooding in a major storm than our flood maps currently indicate. So we know firms don't capture all areas that are at risk of flooding. Some communities map additional areas that may be referred to as community flood zones. Development in these zones may be regulated by the community just as FEMA's flood zones are regulated. Map updates may also be requested of FEMA through the letter of map revision process. This is an example in Sarasota County of a community flood zone. The area in gray is that community flood zone that goes above and beyond the FEMA mapped areas, which are shown in blue. And this map is here in our community and illustrates an area that was that had a map adjustment from a letter of map revision process. Let's see. Did I skip a slide? Sorry. Okay. So our code stipulates that some measures to minimize risks to the new development, but how are surrounding areas impacted overall, and what about upstream development outside of our jurisdiction? Something called no adverse impact is a concept strategy that broadens the focus from just the built-upon environment to include how changes to the built-upon environment potentially impact other properties. The no adverse impact strategy works best as a regional solution because the drainage area that contributes to flooding is regional. And this pink area is the Mud Creek watershed.
Brendan, before you move off this slide, I just want to point out this is a significant, people wonder why Hendersonville has flooding around Spartanburg Highway and Greenville Highway in that area. As you know, Mud Creek runs through the middle, and you can see with the 2 blue lines that then converge in Hendersonville with the arrow, you can see all the water from outside the city comes through into the middle of the city, which I know the city council has seen the slide or similar slides on numerous occasions, but always important to point it out to the public that, you know, the water that comes through the city is water that's outside, it's everybody's water. It's not just the city's water. So you can see a good portion of the county drains through the middle of the city. And that's to know as we are dealing with stormwater and floodplain and flood risk. So just want to point that out.
Right. Yeah, very good point. Thank you, Mr. Conant. I borrowed this slide from Larry Larson, the Executive Director of the Association of State Floodplain Managers, to highlight the importance of local government's role in the no adverse impact strategy. Most development increases impervious and reduces natural habitat, whereas green space and wetland absorb more rain and help to reduce flooding. This slide illustrates that every development has the potential to impact others in the floodplain. Sometimes certain developed areas are returned to nature, quote unquote, after weighing certain variables. That can also be known as a floodplain buyout. It's when a property acquisition in which a government agency purchases private property and relocates or demolishes any structures on it and preserves the land as open space in perpetuity to restore and conserve natural floodplain functions. So just to touch on some of the work that is currently ongoing in the city, elimination of siloed review. The Community Development Department has had a leading role in this effort by pulling together various city departments as well as outside organizations to collaborate in our reviews. This collaboration has led to discoveries of gaps in the language and good conversations about improvements that we can make to the language of our ordinances. Public Works and the Stormwater Division have been active in improving old infrastructure that can worsen flooding. Stormwater Department is also working on the comprehensive stormwater master plan, which will evaluate all subbasins in the city to develop a holistic and defensible prioritization system for stormwater capital projects throughout the city, and allowing us to identify or prioritize capital improvements to the existing stormwater infrastructure and plan to combat future issues head-on. And our stormwater administrator has been instrumental in acquiring and installing several new flood sensors that are able to alert us to flood dangers, and our emergency and public information staff has been instrumental in being proactive and warning people about closing off unsafe routes. Here's an example of that flood sensor that's been installed on Mud Creek. So here's some quick summary of things being done elsewhere. In North Carolina, the town of Apex is enforcing a special overlay district in their flood damage prevention ordinance. And they allow no development in Zone AE, which is like that base floodplain that we saw on that first flood map. They may also study some unstudied streams and enforce them in the same way. Wake County enforces their flood damage prevention ordinance on flood soil maps, which are maps based on study of soils to determine historic flooding in the area. Town of Cary has a 2-foot freeboard, which is a vertical distance above the base floodplain, the base flood elevation, that they extend into Zone X, which is also sometimes referred to as the 500-year floodplain, or outside of the base floodplain, and they enforce that area in their flood damage prevention ordinance. So getting here toward the end, possible things that we can pursue, permit connectivity, and as well as all those other things that the other communities are doing. Permit connectivity, where we have our zoning and flood damage prevention ordinance working together, continue education and outreach that our stormwater department has been excelling at, have consultant analysis to better define risk gaps and to provide strategies to address them, which may include community flood hazard areas or the letter of map revision process, and to assess the outlook for regional strategy and coordination on a wider scale. And that is, sorry, that's the end of the presentation. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Any questions for Brendan?
Thank you, Brendan. Just to bring some context to it, one reason we had Brendan do this presentation as our floodplain manager is we've had a situation in the last year or so where we had an area where development permits were issued on property to construct some residential units, and they were not, the area was not shown as a floodplain on our FEMA map, our firm maps, but the neighbors let it be known to our staff and questioned the issuance of the permits because the area in the history had flooded. They had seen flooding and seen lots of water in the areas where they were building these homes. Unfortunately, there was nothing that we could do from a regulatory standpoint. We did work with the builder or ask the builder to please notify the property owners or the folks prospective owners of the homes that the area had flooded, or had, at least in one case, had flooded. And so the conversation was had. I know some of the city council members may have gotten a call about that, but it made us realize there may be areas in the city or in our ETJ that may be flood prone, but they're not on on our FEMA firm maps. And the conversation was had, well, maybe we need to share that with council, just for, first as an education piece, and secondly, for direction. You know, do you want us to look at areas like that and possibly look at doing our own flood studies, doing some public education, particularly as we get more into our stormwater program and the work that Brendan's doing with the floodplain, just to identify potential risks that may be out there that may not be recognized on the FEMA map. So I'm going to stop right there and let council ask any questions of Brendan and or us staff.
Can you pull your slides, or can his slides be put back up? Can you go to the Sarasota, Florida one?
Sure.
You have to go through all those pictures.
I did the animations, I was like,
Yeah.
a lot of clicks. Okay, I think we're getting there.
Yeah. So could we do that in the city of Hendersonville, where we create maps that are, I think you called them community flood hazard areas?
Right.
That are not on FEMA maps, but would have the same, I don't know if the word is, enforcement, but at least everybody knows that, hey, it floods here. It may not be in the FEMA map, but it floods here. And it puts everybody on notice.
Right, yeah, great question. So, so we are allowed to go further in our flood regulations, this would be an example of that locally. So certainly that is one option of something we could do. The FEMA would not recognize this necessarily unless we had asked them to take it on in part of their, they have a process for accepting it.
LOMR?
Yes, exactly. So it would be distinct from FEMA maps, but it could be enforced on a.
If it is distinct from a FEMA map, why does that matter? As long as there's a map and everybody knows it's floodplain, floodway, whatever it is, that at least puts people on notice that you're building. I mean, I'm assuming it would also limit development, or would it limit development?
Yes, so we have, we could, in our flood damage prevention ordinance and our zoning ordinance, refer to these areas and have the same restrictions for development as we do for the base flood plain. One of the distinctions perhaps is that the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, doesn't look at the local flood maps as opposed to, they look at FEMA. They look at.
So they would not require flood insurance. Basically, the mortgage companies may not require flood insurance.
They may not, right.
Those kind of things. And I think Brendan's right. There are some things we can look at from a development regulatory. I would, before I put that in stone, want to make sure the city attorney and the other folks looked at it from an authority, make sure we had the authority, same authority that they have in Florida and North Carolina. That would be something I'd want to look at. But based on what the examples from Cary and Apex and Wake County, there seems to be some broad authority to regulate above and beyond the FEMA maps. So.
I have a question. Would that be essentially, though, like condemning someone's property? Like if you put a label that broad on it? Is that?
So that's something that, that we would have to look at and take into consideration as we develop regulations, if that's something that City Council were interested in doing. Usually you have to deprive people of all reasonable use of their property before regulations would be considered a taking. So like no development in a zone, maybe. We just have to take a look at, so at a minimum mapping just to provide notice, certainly we could do that. But beyond that, we just have to look, we have not spent any time delving into limits of what our authority is on this topic. Wanted to see, I guess, if there's interest from City Council first.
Well, and that's what I would like to at least advocate to council, is that we start with drawing our own zones and then decide if we want to take those zones and do the LOMR and put them, ask FEMA to include them on their zones. And I'm assuming FEMA does this, so they must have dealt with the takings issue. Yeah, so there must be some federal regulation about that somewhere that deals with.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, kind of half joking when I heard this was coming, said, well, that's always going to be my preference to let FEMA come in first
Yeah.
and see if it's something they want to regulate.
Well, yeah, so I guess my recommendation to council is that we start making our own maps, and from those maps, we apply the letter of whatever that meant. Letter of map review. LOMR.
Right.
That we get a LOMR, and go from there, because the situation that Mr. Khan talked about was just not good. Things were built in places that they just probably shouldn't have been built, and there was nobody broke the law, but it was just not on a FEMA map. So I think that would help, especially with we've heard about the difficulty of FEMA in keeping their maps updated. We all know that, heavy rains continue, even when it's not a hurricane. And so we are best able to identify these areas of flooding that are not on the FEMA map. The other problem you mentioned was FEMA only deals with 1 square mile. So there are lots of little pockets where it's not 1 square mile, but it definitely floods, that should be on a map somewhere. So that's my recommendation to council, is that we allow Mr. Shanahan to, I don't know about you, but someone to start drawing the areas that we think are in floodplain, but are not on FEMA maps.
Is this something that staff can do, or would it be a situation where we have to hire outside consultants to handle it for us?
This would be a situation where we would want to have a consultant. They could provide a lot of direction for us, and I know that the work that Mr. Huffman is doing with the master plan that he's working on will hopefully, provide us with a lot of that information and direction as well.
Oh, I have some more questions. So, in your experience, how hard is it to get FEMA to accept the new areas?
So it's a somewhat of a time-consuming process. I mean, it takes several months. But I don't know that it's difficult. There has to be an analysis done to kind of define that has to follow the certain steps of engineering standards, and they'll have their engineers look at that, and as they'll go through it step by step, and if it looks acceptable, then they'll incorporate it into their maps.
I think if the data's there, then they typically will make the amendment. They hire, there are folks that do this, consultants, and we use some of them from time to time, that they're in the area, in the community. Our time frame is probably not as it's not as immediate as like when a developer's trying to do it. Obviously, it seems like it takes forever, right? Because a lot of times in the development process they're in a hurry, whereas in our we've got time to work through the process and do it. But I don't know that it's a huge amount of time. It's got to go through their bureaucratic channels and those things. I think that's a pretty good way.
If there were areas that we had determined flood prone, that FEMA does not determine flood prone, does that prohibit them from being able to obtain full flood insurance? And then if their property did flood and they were seeking relief, would them not being on the FEMA map prohibit them from being able to obtain FEMA funds?
That is a good question.
So, sorry.
Go ahead. I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that any property, you don't have to be inside the floodplain to get flood insurance. But as far as obtaining the FEMA funding, I think you're correct. I think that's as far as I know, I don't know the answer to that question, I should say.
You mean like if there's a flood, you mean some type of FEMA?
Let's say that the property did flood exceptionally and damaged hundreds of thousands of dollars of property. If they're not in a zoned FEMA area, would they be able to recoup FEMA funds for that if they were not identified by FEMA? I guess that's my concern, is there being inconsistencies in the mapping that would then inhibit somebody from being able to recoup funds or relief.
So I think there's a difference between obviously flood insurance and the money you would get to make repairs on the flood insurance, and then if you had a catastrophic event and there was a federally declared disaster, FEMA funds would be, people within the declared area have eligibility, whether they're in the flood zone or not, for FEMA funds if they're damaged under a federally declared disaster. I don't think it is based on whether you're in the floodplain or not in the floodplain.
I can give you a real world example of that. So in Ivan, 04, 05, when basically we're out of school for like a week because of the hurricane, because of the way my sewer system is set up, we have to pump from beneath the yard up into the street. And so without electricity for 7 days, that's muy malo, very bad. So we actually applied for a FEMA grant to get a generator for just that purpose. Wow. And I don't live my house is not in any kind of floodplain. Okay. So, but because Henderson County was declared a disaster area, we were able to do that.
Wow. My only other question is, it's inevitable that we're flooding at a greater frequency, and then, I think a priority of the council also should be looking at ways, and I don't know if it's how we can do it, but, continuing to expand our waterways to make sure that the water flow rate is adequate, and that, if there are areas of less intake into larger basins, if those areas can be examined to be, a greater source of movement of the water, to just try to help move the water more efficiently as just an additional step.
So like mitigation type projects.
Right. And I know we do a lot of those already. Like Mike does a lot of, like stream bank restoration, but are there ways to look at routing water differently or moving it differently?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a really big part of it. And I think that's also something that a consultant would, I think that we would want them to take a holistic look at the issue and look at the different solutions that should include, many things, not just what the maps look like, but mitigating that risk. And I think that the infrastructure question is a big.
Yeah, because it seems like if there's better or healthier water movement, then there may be areas on these maps that may not even be required to be on the map anyway, if there's, a better movement or flow of water around those properties.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So are we okay with him looking into the process of identifying areas that are flood prone that may not be on the FEMA maps?
Yes.
Okay. One C first, are there any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Then I would say there does appear to be interest from the council to pursue what we could do as far as mapping or coordination among departments. So I guess we will ask the city manager to follow up on that. Okay? Everyone okay with that? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Unfinished business, zoning text amendment lighting ordinance.
Thought I'd start with a quick recap of my previous presentation. I know the chief's excited. No, I don't have, Madam Mayor, members of council, much to update. I will just note the changes that we made based on the feedback at your January workshop meeting, which are included in a staff memo that was a part of your agenda packet, basically just highlighting in section 6-19-3, the site lighting standards that we shifted the 0.5 foot candles to 1 foot candle, and then we added 2 definitions in the section for definition of terms related to ornamental lighting and then architectural lighting, just to further clarify their use in the amendment, zoning text amendment. Otherwise, the 2 ordinances that are included in the agenda package have been updated with the language, one for the zoning text amendment and one for the code of ordinances. And I'm available for questions.
The ordinance as written exempts government and churches, correct?
That's correct.
Or religious institutions?
Yeah. Yeah, the only changes made to the ordinance that you reviewed are those 3 that I...
The original ordinance has the exemption in it, right, yeah.
But it's an exemption from just the ornamental and architectural, not from the entire thing. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Because I feel like we still have some confusion around it being an exemption from the entire thing, and that is not what it is.
Well, sorry, are we discussing now, Mayor? Are we discussing now?
Yes.
Okay. I agree that I don't think we should be exempted from it. I do not want to get into the discussion of churches because that would bring up a lot of emotions, and I can live with that one, but I think that governments, I just look at the police station. It's beautiful the way it's lit. It's, almost like, aesthetically, it's beautiful at night. So obviously it can be done and done well. And I think that we should hold ourselves to that same level of, architectural design as the police station. However, I would agree that if we are going to hold ourselves, I do think we need to give ourselves a window to reach it, because we can't just like snap and it'll be done tomorrow. So I know we discussed before on like a 3-year window for the city to come in compliance, or governments to come in compliance, or at least the city. I do think that's, because practically, as Lou explained, we would be in violation tomorrow morning under some of these, because it's ordinance as opposed to development code.
Other comments?
Yes, I have some comments.
Mm-hmm.
I am not in favor of immunization right now. Any immunization will put a financial burden on small businesses during this time when they are struggling due to the inflation and recovering from COVID.
If it were 15 years versus 10?
We don't know what the future holds.
No, I'm just asking. What's in there is 10. We're going to have to start making some motions somewhere in here to discuss these. I'd like to make one whenever we're ready to make motions, at least on the government exemption one.
Okay. Do you know where that was in here?
No.
But I've been trying to.
6-19-2,
6-19-2.
D6.
D-2D6? I see 6-19-2.
Subparagraph D, 9-6. Yeah, IX 6. I think they're pulling it up on the.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Oh, I see it.
-2, 6-19-2, is that right, Lou? Not .2?
For looking at it, you'll want to pull up the attachment in the package that's specifically ordinance, not the
Yeah, the
staff
actual
report.
ordinance.
I think it says
Pass
CC ordinance, yeah,
you
right
go.
there, that's where it is.
Right there.
So it's 6-19-2D, IX9, subcategory 6. I don't even know how you say that, but that's what it
What's
is.
the first part? 6 what?
6-19-2.
6-19-2D, Roman numeral 9, 6. Is that correct?
Correct.
So public buildings means government buildings, is that right?
I
mean, it would also mean like.
I mean, that's.
I would
Schools
prefer it
and-
said publicly owned buildings, so that it's clear, because some people could say, you know, a place where the public is generally allowed to go.
I would
is a
agree with
public
that.
building. So I would prefer it said publicly.
But publicly owned means the government?
Yes.
Schools,
Schools, state, schools,
libraries, post offices.
right, things like that.
So you're,
But if I'm saying if we remove it, it doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter.
but you're suggesting that we not be exempted from
Correct.
the ornamental and architectural lighting,
Correct.
which would mean if we take that out, then like the lighting that's on the historic courthouse would have to.
So
Go
I
away.
guess here when I'm saying we, I really mean the city. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Is
realize,
the lighting that is on the new police station compliant with what the new guidelines for ornamental and architectural lighting would be?
I mean, I was working under that assumption that it was.
We have not specifically reviewed the PD for whether or not it complies with all of the standards if you remove the ornamental and architectural. I know that as a general rule, the site lighting that was installed and the wall packs are all compliant. I don't know if they installed any decorative architectural lighting, but general rule, yes, the PD is compliant. But there would be impacts potentially to other, and I think you would say, Angela, we can't pick our publicly owned buildings if we don't exempt them. They don't, any state, county, or city building
So,
would be required to comply.
If I could add one thing, though, they're non-conforming. You don't have to go back and retroactively change unless you leave the amortization in. So if you don't exempt public buildings, what we have now would get to stay. It might only get to stay 15 years, but it would get to stay, depending on what you do with amortization. Does that make sense?
Yes. Could you also, in yada, 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 6, this is crazy, except for the city of Hendersonville. In other words, it applies to us and not other government buildings.
So you can always voluntarily comply.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I was going to say,
You can always voluntarily
if
do
you
that.
left it in there and we were non-conforming, the council could set a directive
Absolutely.
outside of this.
I think I would rather
Yes.
do that.
But it also sounds to me like 6 needs to be reworded anyway.
Just
Be
to publicly own.
Publicly owned buildings.
Yes.
Okay.
Council in a separate policy or separate directive to the staff could say,
Which we all agree on.
All right, so let's start with that one. Madam Mayor, I move that we amend
The draft.
16-19-2, D9-6, to say publicly owned buildings.
Is that,
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
okay? All right. Any discussion on that? If not, those in favor of amending public buildings to be publicly owned buildings, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Okay, so that now reads publicly owned buildings. Anything else?
I would like to move that we remove the amortization.
Okay, can we, where is
I
that?
don't exactly know what section or D9.
In 6-19-4.
I can't see it.
Oh, there it is.
A.
Yep.
Existing, okay.
Well, is it? Okay. 6-19-4.
Okay, it currently says amortization on or before, insert whatever we want to insert, all exterior lighting shall comply with this code.
So we could actually, I could actually request that we remove 16-19-4 altogether. Does that entire section have to do with, just, all the words are big.
I feel like you could do that because then it's the next section that talks about the other.
The non-conforming.
The other non-conforming,
Right.
triggers.
So then, Madam Mayor, I move that we remove 6-19-4, existing exterior lighting amortization.
Okay, would that cover everything we want to cover?
On amortization?
I think so.
Yeah, because it would only be taking out the amortization, right? None of the other triggers, because those are all 6-2-5.
Okay, does that,
My preference would be to put a period after the words 6-2-5 and take out with the following exception, and then that subparagraph A. Because it just makes it clear that non-compliant can continue in accordance with 625. Just take out with the following exception, A, amortization.
Oh, okay.
so in 6-19-4, it would read, non-compliant lighting installed prior to the effective date of this ordinance shall be considered non-conforming and may continue to be used in accordance with the non-conforming standards found in section 6-2-5.
And then.
And it leaves, the rest would be struck. It would no longer say anything about amortization.
Yes. What you said.
It would be to strike with the following exception, amortization on or before, insert effective date, all exterior lighting shall comply with this code. That would be removed. Is there any discussion?
Would you agree with 15 years? 10 is what's there. As opposed to striking it, just change the 10 to 15.
I would prefer to agree with 0 years.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
No. I don't want there to be amortization.
I mean, I've said it last time. I don't know if we necessarily have to have it because of the other triggers that are in there.
I guess that's a no.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
It currently does say if they're replacing more than 50% of various categories that they would have to comply. Okay? All right, the motion is to strike the words in 6-19-4, everything after 6-2-5. That would include the paragraph on amortization. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No?
Okay. Motion is 4-1 in favor of striking, and so it does pass. Is there anything else?
Is there a foot candle discussion?
We already
Or-
changed that.
That's already in
to
there.
one
That's
foot.
already changed.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
After we vote on this, I would like to discuss what we're going to require the city to do. But that's not part of this ordinance.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else on the proposed amendment regarding the lighting ordinance?
So then, do we read this with, as amended, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
As
you just-
far as I know,
I
that's
think you
what
just
we
read
need to do.
as amended.
Yeah. Okay. You want to do it? Whomever.
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council adopt an ordinance amending the official City of Hendersonville zoning ordinance, Article 6, general provisions, adding Section 6-19, revising Section 6-2, nonconforming, and Section 6-13, nuisances, and Article 7, development review, and Article 12, definitions of terms based on the following as amended. Is that, can I say that?
Does that sound,
As amended by motions made tonight.
As amended by previously made motions this evening, 1, the petition is found to be consistent with the City of Hendersonville 2030 Comprehensive Plan based on the information from the staff analysis and the public hearing, and because this petition aligns with the comprehensive plan goals to minimize the negative impacts of growth strategy LU-3.5 and to protect wildlife habitat strategy NR-1.2. 2, we find this petition in conjunction with the recommendations presented by staff to be reasonable in the public interest based on the information from the staff analysis and the public hearing, and because the proposed text amendment establishes standards which allow for the sufficient and safe lighting of sites while reducing negative impact on people, plants, and animals. The proposed text amendment establishes standards which address light pollution, an issue of growth, international, national, and regional concerns, and the text amendment would ensure that both public lighting and private non-residential lighting would meet standards that minimize light pollution.
is there any discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. All right, that is the first motion. Now there's a second motion.
I move the City Council adopt an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to amend Chapter 46, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places, adding Article 6, Streetlights to the Code of Ordinances as presented for the first reading.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
Madam Mayor, may I
Yes.
comment on that?
Please.
For this particular ordinance, if it passes by supermajority or unanimously, will only require one reading, so.
Oh.
Okay. All right, is there any discussion on this? If not, those in favor of the Code of Ordinances amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, it is a unanimous vote on that.
Man, I feel like we should pop a bottle or something. It's done. The lighting. Oh, cheers.
Okay,
That was awesome, dear.
all right. Now,
Before we go to 8A,
yeah,
so I guess for council, are we in agreement that we want to direct staff for the city to come into compliance?
Yes.
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 I'm not sure how long we want to give ourselves, but
Well, I
I
mean,
think we should.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, my fault, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. There's no legal requirements of a compliant state, but
We will work to bring ourselves into compliance with your lighting ordinance, with the idea that you wanted to not be exempt and get all the down lighting, eliminate light pollution as much as we can, if not all the way.
add to the budget fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, new business. Designation of limited parking zone on Oakland Street.
Mayor Vogt, members of City Council, we have received a request from Hendersonville High School to assist with some off-street parking visitor parking issues they're having around their main office, and they've asked the city to designate 2 on-street parking spaces, which would be directly in front of their office location on Oakland Street as 15-minute parking. And Councilmember Hensley had a great suggestion that I think we can do this, Tom, and put it in the signs that the 15-minute parking is restricted for school hours. That way, if there's sporting events, that would not be a limitation. I think we can do that by ordinance. I'm looking at, we can set specific limits, I think, can't we, Madam Attorney, and say that it'd be 15-minute parking between the hours of
8 and 4.
8 and 4.
You don't need to go 4. 8 and 3.
8 and 3.
8 and 3.
So that would be the request
Monday through Friday.
for 2 parking spaces Monday through Friday, limited to 15-minute from 8 to 3, and also designate 1 space for law enforcement vehicles on the street. That will open up some parking that will assist parents and visitors to the school adjacent to the office.
I have a question on the law enforcement one, and that is, do we want to put the same time limits on that one? Or would that be just designated always for law enforcement? The only reason I bring that up is football games, basketball games,
Yeah.
activities in the evening in which we have SROs come, they know they have a parking spot.
Yep, I think that's a great
The
idea.
football games have even more police officers, but at least that spot is open.
I would leave that, I mean, it's 1 space.
I would agree. You should just designate it all the time this- for the police.
Yep.
It's a shame those who designed that school didn't allot for adequate parking in the school. Just gonna put that out there.
I'll have that discussion with you later.
I'd like to hear it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion or a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council adopt the ordinance establishing a limited parking zone on Oakland Street near the main office of Hendersonville High School with the suggested amendment with regard to timing on the sign.
Okay. Is there any
And
discussion?
the law enforcement person,
And-
do we want to have that one on there?
You want
Jerry?
that specifically listed?
Okay, and with the law enforcement parking space to be designated law enforcement 24 hours a day.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Not? Those in favor of the limited parking on Oakland, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. All right. Well, we can get those signs up. Thank you. Next, continuation of American Rescue Plan discussion. Who's going to lead this off?
Madam Mayor, we will put up the spreadsheet there for the council, but I will defer to the mayor and the city council on this item. I believe there's been some discussion, there's some discussions among the council on this, so I will defer to the council. We'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Okay. Anyone want to start?
Sure, unless somebody else wants to go.
Go ahead.
Oh, my fault, Liz. Go ahead, excuse me.
I would like to see us fund the Safe Light Sane program for the full 100,000.
I agree with you on that one. I think we've already pretty much committed the 800 to Connection Center. And Apple Ridge, we talked about 400,000 from the ARPA funds plus 400 from water sewer. Is that correct? Is that what we had talked about?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. With
regard to the Connection Center, I'm not I'm obviously in support of the $800,000. I do think, considering where it's going to be, which is a fair statement as to, that's a question mark there, that money is designed really for the location. And it seems to me that we're designating that for the location. And I'm not sure how to word this, but we need to wait till we get a location first before we release those funds to build something.
So one caveat to that, we know we allocated $800,000 for the Connection Center. They have some funding needs much less than that for pre-development work, architecture, drawings and things. And what we discussed with the Connection Center is that we would develop an agreement where we could allocate funding as they go in small increments. And Angie, Madam Attorney, help me, but I think we talked about maybe setting aside $100,000
We
initially.
basically contract with them to study and develop the Connection Center, period. And it's an administrative fee. It's a contracted service that they would be doing this for us.
So we would set aside $100,000, but then
$100,000 to
you set aside
fund.
all $800,000, but $100,000 in the first small pre-development, and then we would come back with another contract for the rest of the money. And if that money's,
700 after the 100.
yeah,
Right.
That we just,
hold on to
Would
it.
go
and of
to the
course, we
building.
want it to work. So
Yeah.
it's not that we do not want it to work.
But the council would have to approve a second contract before we distribute the rest of the money.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. It's a great idea.
And I'd like to see the requested amount going to Pisgah Legal. It's kind of a unique program in the county, as well as needed.
I would
So-
agree with that.
Madam Mayor, so on the screen in front of us, then that 300 should become 320?
Yes.
I'd go with the 320.
Yeah, okay. Who's typing?
Yeah. Allison, can
Or
you,
is that not live?
can you update those numbers? Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Obviously, we haven't adjusted any of the other numbers, which we can do momentarily, so as we go. So,
Okay.
Allison, if you will also update the Safe Light Phoenix project to 100,000, please. Because we need to also, yeah.
Are we?
So let's, also, before we go any further, let's remove, let's remove 100,000 for IAM temporarily, and also 50,000 for Children Family Resource. That has not been discussed yet, and 50,000 for True Ridge. That should bring us back to where everything else has been discussed at this point. So I'll let council go from here, and you have a rolling tally.
Well, I would like to put the 100,000 back in for IAM.
I agree, me too.
I would agree with that.
I would like, so this is where I need your help, because we talked about this before the meeting. The housing assistant home repair, we apparently need some money for our CDBG grant, but maybe not, we don't need $250,000 in that.
Oh, I meant to remove that too. So yes, remove
Yeah.
250,000, please. Why don't we do the others, and then we'll come back
Okay.
to housing assistance.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, I would advocate that we put the 50,000 back in for True Ridge for the, I believe that was for interpreter services. Should be another one.
I would like to see us put some money in for Children and Family Resource Center. I know that the Glowmobile, which was the project, will serve kids that are outside of the city of Hendersonville limits, but it will also serve, kids who are inside the city limits. And I think it helps set a priority for early childhood education.
How's 100,000 sound? Do you have a number in mind?
No, I'm comfortable with 100,000. I know that we had discussed it before and there was some back and forth about whether or not we do the full ask. I think 100,000 would be fair for the percentage.
So the housing assistance, you're saying, does not need
Well-
that money, or?
We're going to come right back to that, I think.
Well,
probably
we better come back soon because, that number's getting ticked up there
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. So my suggestion, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, because we know we're going to need some money for home repair and particularly with the CDBG project. Again, city manager's suggestion that we allocate the remaining 130,000 to housing assistance home repair to assist with our CDBG project and what we know is a need in our community for home repair. And that is, and as we discussed, using that money instead of money for other positions that city manager had recommended previously, that we will find other mechanisms or defer until future budget cycles.
I have a question for Angie. So the money for Apple Ridge, do we need to, I mean, that's assuming Apple Ridge is going to happen. So do we need to do some wording that makes it clear that is for Apple Ridge? And if Apple Ridge doesn't happen, then that money comes back? Or we figure out what we want to do with it?
We haven't finished that agreement yet, have we?
We haven't. So my suggestion would be to just vote on the allocations upon the condition that the contracts be brought back to you with each one for
Gotcha.
final approval.
Okay, got it. So that's how we'll do that.
And that, because there may be some others that don't use all the allocation too.
Yeah.
Are there further suggestions, or would someone like to make a motion that the numbers on the screen be our funding allocation?
I'll go for it. Lindsay, you want to do it?
No, go for it.
Okay. Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt the,
We good? Did someone say?
please speak up if we're not doing something right.
Hey, you're good.
Okay.
Okay. All right. All in favor of this allocation, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it.
I wish I had another can.
All right.
Gosh.
Wrapping up a lot of
Okay.
business.
So we will work with all of you on allocations. Okay. All right. It's been a long process. But important to the community. Amendments to city code to conform with SB 300.
Imminent.
Okay. Mr. Beaman.
Eminent Daniel Heyman.
Be more bowing. Good evening. Madam Mayor, City Council, I am the eminent Daniel Hyman. And you've probably heard a lot about SB 300 over the past few months, and of course, we're presenting to you tonight an ordinance that will make several revisions to comply with it. So I'll get into, and also, I kind of liked our black text on white background that planning presentations used to be, but our current community development department jazzed it up, so I had to get the clip art out.
Oh, my gosh.
So SB 300 is a short title for Session Law 21-138, also known as, that's the title in the inset there. It's quite a mouthful, and it did a lot of things. It was broadly a criminal justice reform bill, and so here's some of the main things that it accomplished. A lot of new requirements about disclosing law enforcement recordings, some stuff about law enforcement officers' duty to intervene when there's use of force, some mental health screenings, other things you see on the list. But what we're talking about tonight is ordinance decriminalization. So previously, before SB 300 went into effect, almost all ordinance violations could be punished criminally. The statute there, there's an excerpt, 14-4, said that
If any person violates an ordinance of a city, they'll be guilty of a Class 3 misdemeanor. And then we more or less parroted that in our city code. It currently says that if there's no specific penalty, the violation is a Class 3 misdemeanor. So SB 300 kind of changes the way we have to do some things. First, some ordinances can never be criminal. So here's a list of those. Anything we get authority to enact through 160D, that's the land use and planning statute. Pretty much everything in there can no longer be criminal. Anything related to stream clearing programs, regulation and licensing of businesses and trades, outdoor advertising, that's billboards, solar collectors, limitations on regulating cisterns and rain barrels, taxis, setbacks, and curb cut regulations. There's also some new defenses to ordinance violation. This is specifically if you've been charged with a crime for violating an ordinance. First, nobody can be found guilty criminally of violating a local ordinance if there's no new alleged violation within 30 days. So basically they come and say, well, I haven't done it again in the past month. Okay, case dismissed. And then number two, the other defense is if they've made a good faith effort to seek assistance to address any underlying factors related to unemployment, homelessness, mental health, or substance abuse that might relate to the person's ability to comply with the local ordinance. So that's pretty broad. Obviously, we haven't seen that in effect yet, but so there you go. And then finally, we now have to specifically state what ordinances are criminal. So the statute now reads, ordinances may be a misdemeanor or infraction as provided in General Statutes 14-4, only if the city specifies as such in the ordinance. And then it also says, no ordinance specifying a criminal penalty may be enacted at the meeting in which it's first introduced. It sounds like you're all already aware of that. We understand first introduced to mean when it's first voted on. A note about preemption, this isn't really a new requirement. It's nothing to do with SB 300, but there are a lot of changes in the proposed ordinance related to preemption. And so there's an ordinance that more or less talks about it. It's that an ordinance, city ordinance isn't consistent with state or federal law when the elements of an offense defined by city ordinance are identical to the elements of an offense defined by state or federal law. And there's some case law that establishes that a local ordinance was void where general statute dealt with identical conduct. So basically, if we're criminalizing, if we're holding somebody to the same standard of conduct, then that's not going to be consistent with state or federal law. So we can't do that. A very real picture of our code of ordinances there. And we just couple of notes on when we went through and decided what's going to be criminal and what's not going to be criminal. These are some of the things we try to take into account. And so I'm not aware of any criminal prosecution of city ordinances in the past several years. We don't actually prosecute a whole lot of people for violation of city ordinance. It's a really helpful tool for getting compliance, though. So if there's an immediate danger, law enforcement needs to get somebody out of a situation now, it's a good tool. If somebody isn't persuaded by civil penalties, maybe it's profitable for them to just pay the civil penalty and keep doing what they're doing. And there's discretion. Law enforcement doesn't have to arrest somebody, and the DA's office doesn't have to prosecute it. A couple notes about the draft. I happened to see McGruff the crime dog making a lot of noise using a park mobile spot, so I snapped a picture for this. There's nothing about Chapter 10 animals in here. You may be aware the Animal Services Advisory Committee is working on an overhaul of the animal ordinance, and that'll be presented to you sometime soon in the near future. But not to worry. A lot of the provisions, a lot of the criminal stuff in there is preempted, or there's a general statute counterpart that is a good placeholder, so like mistreatment of animals, probably going to be a little different than the state statute, but there's, it's not legal in the meantime. Nothing about the noise ordinance in here, because of course you've been discussing the noise ordinance separately, and nothing about the parking ordinance for the same reason, and also it's explicitly non-criminal. You get a parking ticket, you don't get arrested for parking violation. I'm going to run through a summary of the changes that's in the draft ordinance, because of course it's quite lengthy. And I'll just move through these, but stop me if you want to talk about any of them in particular, I suppose. So first, section 1-6, that's our general penalty provision, and that's where it talks about if no penalty is specifically provided, it's a misdemeanor. So we kind of set out that ordinances are criminal when it's specifically stated. And we also added a definition for infraction. There was a couple of things that were identified as infractions already, and then we've added some more that we'll get to. And an infraction is basically just a lesser criminal offense. You're going to get a $50 ticket. You're not going to get put in jail for that. Chapter 6, alcoholic beverages. Of course, that's heavily regulated by the state. It's more or less preempted. We have some narrow authority to do some things there. We made some changes to comply with our authority. And then a provision that's no longer criminal is sale near schools. We don't have authority to make that criminal. Incidentally, it's a factor that the ABC board is supposed to consider when they're considering an ABC permit. So, and of course, this wouldn't legalize somebody like popping their trunk next to the school. That would be criminal under state law. It's somebody who has an ABC permit. Chapter 8, amusements and entertainments. It's no longer criminal to operate a bungee jumping facility in the city. Some interesting ordinance provisions when you really get into it. And then unlicensed pool rooms and dance halls. Of course, again, those things are still in there. You can't do them, but the remedy now is, are you getting a court order for abatement or giving them civil penalties, things like that. Nothing from Chapter 10, animals. Chapter 10, buildings and building regulations. There's condemnation is in there, for instance. That's a 160D ordinance, but it's specifically criminal under general statute, and it remains so. So no changes there. Under businesses, there's some stuff about massage parlors in there and peddlers as well. And so a lot of that stays criminal, except displaying licenses and keeping records for massage businesses, and then the requirement to display a peddler's permit. If you're not doing those things, you're not going to be charged with a misdemeanor. Chapter 18, cemeteries. Pretty much everything's going to remain a misdemeanor, except the placement of certain prohibited decorations isn't criminal, but they're still going to be removed. In Chapter 20, environment, that's the noise ordinance, so there's no changes. In Chapter 22, fire prevention, everything remains a misdemeanor except for parking in front of a fire hydrant, which already was non-criminal. In Chapter 24, floods, there's no changes. The flood damage prevention ordinance is in that chapter, and there's already some existing references to a state criminal provisions. Stormwater is also in that chapter. That's partially a 160D ordinance, and then the other authority we have in Chapter 143 of the general statutes. Long story short, we don't have authority to make that criminal. In Chapter 26, health and sanitation, it's not going to be criminal to not wear a bicycle helmet. And then nuisances, that's your high grass, your junk, when you get a letter from code enforcement. So, Chapter 28, historic, please.
Yeah, I'll ask the high grass one.
Yes.
So there is a civil penalty for a nuisance, but you can't get a misdemeanor.
Correct, yeah, and I don't think we've ever charged anybody with, but it didn't say that it's not criminal, it doesn't say that it's not criminal in our ordinance, so the previous rule was the default is it could be, so.
Got it. Okay.
You can make it criminal if you want to. You can tell us to make it criminal, but.
You could. We have the authority to.
We're just not proposing it. We're just not proposing.
No, I thought it meant that at one time, like, it said it was criminal, and I wanted to make it clear that it doesn't mean you can leave your grass high, it just means you get.
Right.
You're going to get the same
You
letter.
get fined.
You don't
Correct.
get it.
Yeah.
You're going to get the same letter, and, yeah. Historic preservation, that's a 160D ordinance, so it's no longer criminal to, make a change to a historic building without a COA or something like that. Chapter 34, manufactured homes. It's no longer criminal to place a manufactured home or an RV in the city. Chapter 36, that's a miscellaneous provision chapter. And a lot of that's going to remain a misdemeanor Two things that don't, solicitation and distribution of items in public parking lots, and then nuisance and junk vehicles.
Can I, solicitation of items in public parking lot, that means like I'm selling candy out in the public parking lot?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a rule against that?
there is.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's some discretion in how it gets enforced.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that, yes.
Parks and Recreation, pretty much everything remains criminal. Some of that's the skate park rules are there, and a lot of that pretty much has to be criminal under state law. Chapter 42, secondhand goods, that's pawn shops. And so the entire chapter already referenced state law. We updated those references because it's moved around a bit, but the effect of it is staying the same. Chapter 44, environmental services, littering is preempted. It's a very thorough state statute, so we've referenced that. And then intentional damage to city-provided waste containers is going to remain criminal. Chapter 46, streets, sidewalks, and other places. A couple of things are going to no longer be criminal. Site obstruction at an intersection. Property numbering, that is a provision that says you have to have your address visible at your house. Sidewalk dining, and allowing trees and shrubs to grow into the right-of-way. Those are all things that probably are better taken care of through like a, abatement or something like that. Chapter 50 is traffic. A good portion of the chapter is pretty much verbatim from the motor vehicle statutes, so we've struck a good bit of it as being preempted. Most of the provisions that remain, most operation of motor vehicle violations will be an infraction or a civil penalty, so they won't be a misdemeanor. The provisions that are going to remain a misdemeanor are placing tax in the road, solicitation in the right-of-way, and damaging traffic signals. And those notably are not operation of motor vehicle offenses. So, and then the article about parades, good portion of that's going to remain a misdemeanor, having a parade without a permit and conduct at a parade. In Chapter 52, utilities, there's provisions related to prohibited discharges. There's provisions related to failure to report an accidental discharge. That's going to remain a misdemeanor if it doesn't already refer to a state criminal statute. And then the chapter on backflow prevention, violations of that ordinance is going to remain a misdemeanor. A couple of reminders. It's going to take 2 votes to enact this. If you vote tonight, you can adopt it at the next meeting you vote on it. All ordinances, except the ones that specifically stated otherwise, so parking, primarily were able to be enforced criminally prior to the passage of SB 300. So really you're just going back to what we already had by making these things a misdemeanor. And criminal prosecution of city code violations is very rare. I think it's very rare in most towns, situated similar to Hendersonville. Big cities might do a little more of it, but we use it more of an enforcement tool than an actual, actually charging people with crimes. So they're going to get charged under a state statute more often than not. So any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Questions? Took a lot of reading and comparing to get all of that in.
It did. It was a lot of work. It's not very exciting, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's very important work. So, yeah.
Glad to get it done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions on this? Not? Motion?
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt an ordinance of the City of Hendersonville City Council to amend certain provisions of the Code of Ordinances related to criminal enforcement as presented for its first reading.
Okay. Is there any discussion? If not, those in favor of adopting this ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and it is a unanimous vote on the first reading, but we still have to have a second.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? Is that something that we can just put on the consent agenda, or do
We will, just like
Noise.
noise
The other one we
consent
did.
tonight.
Okay.
But what was the thing you said about if we had a unanimous, we didn't have to have a second reading?
So it just gets more and more complex.
Never mind. Sorry I asked. Sorry I asked.
Okay.
Well, I'll ask you outside of a council
Okay.
meeting.
Okay, we have some appointments. Appointments to Tree Board, Planning Board, and the Environmental Sustainability Board. Had a member who resigned from the Tree Board, so there is an opening there. Would anyone like to make a nomination?
Do we make a nomination or we just make a motion?
We could probably.
Well, yeah, you would nominate someone.
So we do have one application from Ms. Laura Redfern, if the
Yeah.
council would like to make that nomination.
Madam Mayor, I nominate Laura Redfern.
Okay, are there further nominations? If not, those in favor of Laura Redfern being appointed to the Tree Board to finish out a term ending December 2024, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and Laura Redfern has been appointed. We have an opening on the Planning Board. Would anyone like to make a nomination to the Planning Board?
And we have one application to fill that position, and Ms. Yolanda Robinson.
Anyone like to make a nomination?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to nominate Yolanda Robinson.
Yolanda Robinson has been nominated for a 3-year term on the Planning Board. Are there further nominations? Not. Those in favor of Yolanda Robinson for a position on the Planning Board, a 3-year term ending December 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and that position is filled. And then there is an unfinished term on the Environmental Sustainability Board. Are there any nominations?
Madam Mayor, we have one application that fits the criteria for this specific position. That's Ms. Marcia Schaefer.
Are there any nominations?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to nominate Marcia Schaefer.
Okay, Marcia Schaefer has been nominated to the Environmental Sustainability Board. Are there further nominations? Not. Those in favor of Marcia Schaefer to an unexpired term ending June 2024 on the Environmental Sustainability Board, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Okay, got those appointments taken care of. And now we need another appointment for the Recreation Master Plan Steering Committee.
My previous appointment, Hunter Marks, ended up having a conflict with a project that was going on, or that he felt was a conflict. And so he has had to step aside. So I would move that the City Council appoint Carlos Ruiz to the Recreation Master Plan Steering Committee.
Okay, Carlos Ruiz. Okay. Carlos Ruiz has been nominated for a position on the Recreation Master Planning Steering Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. And Mr. Ruiz has been appointed to that committee. So hopefully they'll be able to get to work soon. Okay, City Council comments. Anything anyone wants to bring up?
Yes. Members, Madam Mayor, members of council, after our meeting last week, where we met with members of the county commissioners, it occurred to me that in my 14 years of council, that was only the third time that I'd ever been to a joint meeting with county commissioners and city council. members. One of the other one was for the Garrison property, and then one for the Health Sciences Building. And so I would like to see your interest, regardless of water and sewer, that about establishing a quarterly meeting between county commissioners and city council members, maybe to have lunch, spend an hour, that we could just meet and talk. We can do like before, we can have our staff present wonderful things that we're doing, but just an opportunity for us to be in each other's presence, and we might talk about things, or I'm not saying that we have to, but at least there's an opportunity to discuss items of business between the two boards. I did talk to one commissioner about it, and this commissioner was like, absolutely, no reservation at all. So I want to talk to at least one to see if they thought it was out in left field. And so I wanted to throw that idea out for something like that.
I mean, I think it would be great for us to get together more.
We could call it a lunch and learn.
I think it's great.
I mean, we need to send
I don't know if it needs to be quarterly or every 6
2 meetings a year
months
or
or
something,
something like that, but maybe the frequency, we get a lot of meetings. So
I feel like every 6 months is probably good.
Well, the meeting.
So you don't like quarterly?
That sounds like a lot.
It's 4.
I know, but just, it's every 3 months.
The LGCCA already meets quarterly. So, you know, there are a lot of meetings that they have, a lot of meetings we have. Hate to add too much more to the schedule.
I agree 100% about trying to add too much more to the schedule. I guess in the spirit of trying to keep things from festering, I guess I view quarterly as better than semi-annually, or, but I'm bringing the idea, so I guess anything we do is better than what we currently have.
Maybe we could mention to their board that you're interested and see what kind of frequency that they feel comfortable with too.
Yeah.
But I think every one of their members would support that too. And everybody was very happy to have met, and I just think it's such a great step for us, and I think you are totally right, and I'm glad that you reached out to them, and,
Only reached out to one.
well, him.
You're correct, it was a him.
He was excited. He messaged, he said,
Oh my
Gary
gosh,
told
he
me.
told you?
He was
Golly,
excited.
these
I
people.
thought it was great.
Okay.
Okay?
I was happy that you
So-
mentioned it.
What do you think about, you'll reach out to them, and at our mid-monthly meeting, we can discuss it again to see what comes from that
Okay.
discussion?
Ask them on a date.
We're going to ask them out on a date.
I think that's what was happening.
Okay.
We're going to go play putt-putt together at the new putt-putt course.
Ooh, that could be a good one.
I'm going to crush it, y'all.
Or pick up trash together.
Is that
Yes.
enough
That'd be a
guidance?
good date too.
Oh, we could
Yeah,
pick up
we
trash
might,
together.
we might, I know we tried to do that last year.
Rebecca and I have
got-
done it a couple
yeah.
times, yeah.
So that might be
It's
another.
a good time, picking up
option.
trash.
All right. Well, Mr. Connet and I will reach out to the chairman and county manager and get their feedback on it.
Okay.
All right? Anything else?
I have 3 comments.
Okay.
I know it's a lot of comments, I'm sorry. The first one is, I want to thank staff and council, the planning board, everybody that had to do with that lighting ordinance, because I know that it was a bear to deal with. And so we appreciate everybody taking the time to work on it. Neil already left. I was going to give him a shout out because he really was a great champion for it. Ralph, who initially brought things to us. So it was a real community effort to get that done, and so I appreciate everybody's work on it. The second thing is, I'm so happy that we approved the funding for the ARP money. I know that we had a lot of really great applications. I, for one, had a very hard time trying to sift through them because all of them were deserving. But I just appreciate everybody's patience with us while we went through that process, and I'm proud to say that we gave it as much thought as we did. And the third thing is, Boyd Park and the new mini golf. I don't know if folks missed the presentation that Brian gave us on the plans that we are doing for the putt-putt, but honestly, I think it's going to be honoring the history even more so than what the current park did, and we are working with many local organizations and artists to restore elements from the old putt-putt to put it at the new putt-putt, and it is just going to be, I think it's going to be amazing when people see it come into fruition. So I would encourage you, if you've not seen that plan, is that on our website somewhere? Can we get it out? I know we posted it on Facebook.
We can make it available, yes.
I think it would be great for people to be able to see what that plan is so they can really get excited about it.
Happy to do it.
Anyone else? Okay. City managers report.
Just one brief
Yes.
comment, thanking you for approving the lightning ordinance. Because the police chief was going to tase Lou if he got back up there again, so thank you. We appreciate
It really
that.
would have been lightning then.
He was going to.
It would have been lightning then.
He's going to ride the lightning is what he's going to do. So no other comments, so thank you.
All right.
We don't.
Thank you.
Somebody have a motion?
We don't have the motion to read for closed session.
They're going to put it up there.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
I got it.
All right. We do have closed session.
I think I got it.
Anyway.
No,
Can
that
you
hurts
read
my
it?
neck more. I got it. Madam Mayor, I move that City Council enter closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11A, 1, 3, and 5 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state or of the United States or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, and to discuss the case of O'Neill v. City of Hendersonville, 22 CVS 1738, to establish or to instruct the public body's staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of entering closed session for the reasons just read, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Okay.